Hi, Matt. Thanks for joining me on Behind the Build. I'm Paul Drake, and this podcast is all about getting real insights from leaders in housing, manufacturing, and construction. There's no scripts, there's no sugarcoating, and I'll send you the edited episode when it's ready, and it's great exposure for you and your company. Here's how I'd like to structure our conversation today. I want to understand your background, the trends you're seeing in industry, whether that's technology, market shifts, or operational changes, any challenges that you might be facing right now, and where you'd like to take the business over the next sort of 6 to 12 months. We'll wrap up at the end with any insights that we might both find valuable. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks for having me today.
Excellent. Oh, you're very welcome. It'll probably take about 30 to 40 minutes. And we're going to kick off with a bit about you. Matt, what's your role and how did you end up in this position, please?
Yeah, so my role is president of the company here at Blau Brothers, a mechanical contracting firm. It's a family business of mine. It's started by my granddad. He had a few brothers that were involved at different times, and then my dad and my uncle took it over in the late '80s. Ran it for a number of years. My uncle retired about 10 years ago now, and so my dad was president then for about another 10 years, and I guess it's been just over a year now that since I've moved into the president seat. Started here part time. You know, I remember my mom driving me into work before I even had a driver's license. I was coming in and sweeping the floors and all sorts of stuff like that. Likely, good chance my dad paid my brother and I way more than he ever should have for what he actually got out of us. We probably should have been paying him. But yeah, so did that, kind of worked part-time through school, went to college, got a business degree, and then came to the business after college and started as a project manager assistant, basically just doing the stuff that the other PMs didn't want to do. And then we got to a point where we had more work than we had project managers, and so I took on a couple small projects, and those kind of grew into bigger projects, and did that for a while. And then we had a service manager that was leaving the company, and so I kind of raised my hand and just said, "Hey, if you need someone to sit in the seat for now, happy to do so until you find someone, that can do it probably a lot better than I can." And so I sat there, and what was supposed to be, kind of a temporary gig in that role turned into I don't know, almost an 8 year, probably 7, 8 year stretch that I was in that role until I then, like I said, about a year ago, moved into the role of president. Uh, yeah, that's kind of how I landed where I am now.
Excellent. And give us an overview of the company, Matt, if you would.
Yeah, so I mentioned that we're a mechanical contracting firm, uh, commercial, industrial. Um, we are located in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, so it's kind of the western part of Virginia. We do work about 100-mile radius from a town called Harrisonburg. Um, Most people have heard of our town because there's a large university here, James Madison University. They got a pretty
Yeah.
good football program, so a lot of people have heard of us just because of that. But anyway, so about 100-mile radius. Like I said, we do work in many different sectors, from healthcare, schools, manufacturing, and I mentioned industrial. We've got a construction group as well as a service group. And so, construction is doing new builds, they're doing renovations, additions. One of the more famous mechanical and plumbing jobs that we wrapped up here recently was there was a Bucky's. I don't know if you're familiar with Bucky's. It's a gas chain here that they're kind of like a Walmart and a Sheetz combined. It's a massive gas station, and the first one ever just came to Virginia and opened within the past year. And so we were fortunate enough to be awarded the mechanical and plumbing work there. So that was a neat project to be part of. That's kind of on the construction side. On the service side, we're keeping equipment running, replacing equipment when it goes down. We've got HVAC and plumbing, both in construction and service. We're doing sheet metal work as well as plumbing, piping, all that fun stuff. We got a team of about 150 people here. Blessed to have a lot of really great folks that work here with us. Great team. So yeah, that's kind of a snapshot of the company. I'm trying to think of anything that I might have missed there. Our mission statement is enriching lives. That's whether it's people that work here or people we interact with in the community. We encourage our team members here. Not super frequently, but periodically we get to hear stories of, our guys were driving somewhere and they saw maybe someone had a flat and they stop and help them. So that brings us a lot of pride and joy when we hear of our team members doing that. And our core values are passionate, selfless, and evolving. So that's kind of the you know, motto that we try to live by, make our decisions by. We certainly aren't perfect with those, but yeah, kind of gives you a snapshot of our company.
Yeah, nice. You've got to have these things to work towards, haven't you? And nobody's perfect. So, what does a typical day look like then, Matt? You mentioned a bit of project management. I'm guessing you don't do an awful lot of that now you're president.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, no, I don't. We've got a team of project managers here that do all that heavy lifting. So, typical day for me, I guess, is what you're asking about
Yes.
there. So a lot of it is checking in with the different team members here. Hey, what's on your plate today? Anything I can do to help? One of my, kind of key aspects of my role is culture. The culture here at Blau Brothers. That's something that I've, um, probably most people in my seat fully see as a big part of their role. And so, a lot of it's checking in with team members. Oftentimes, I've got meetings just about every day in one way or another for something. We operate on the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's EOS. Not sure if you've ever heard of that, but it's a yeah, operating system that kind of drives at getting the whole team rowing the same direction. It's been a great platform for us. But as a result of that, I've got a weekly meeting with my leadership team here where we talk about issues, stuff that we have going on. We solve it. We assign to-dos. We've got rocks or goals. So I spend part of my days working on to-dos that I might have from that meeting or rocks that I have for the quarter, trying to advance that. Uh, Periodically, I'm thinking about like today in particular, I'm meeting with one of our larger customers, uh, checking in with them on some stuff they've got going on. Uh, you know, Community involvement. I attend a lot of after hours kind of networking type stuff. So yeah, kind of keeping a pulse on the health of the organization and making sure that we're headed in the right direction.
Good. So moving on to sort of industry trends and technology then, are you seeing any? You mentioned that ELS system, but are you seeing anything specific to your industry right now around technology and operational efficiency?
Yeah, well, certainly the big one that probably most people are talking about is AI, right? The construction industry is probably lagging behind a little bit with that, would be my sense. I know we probably are here at Plow Brothers. We're looking for ways to implement it. We don't quite have the pull that there's some companies that are significantly bigger than us. Our largest competitor is a Comfort Systems USA company, and my guess is as an organization, they're a billion-dollar organization. They've likely got a team dedicated to implementing AI. We don't have that yet, and so a lot of that kind of rests on our leadership team and myself. And so we're trying to figure out how to best utilize that. One of the things that I'm looking at AI to do is make us more efficient, as I'm sure most people are. The piece where I think I might differ from some people is, we just saw, I don't know if you saw this headline, but like UPS just laid off about 50,000 employees. Amazon, yeah, wasn't quite that much, but tens of thousands of employees. A lot of what I saw, at least a little bit I was looking into it, is because of efficiency gains, and I assume some of that has to do with AI. I'm not interested in rolling AI out to our team in an effort to remove positions here. What I would love to see us do with AI is implement it and make the positions we have more efficient and more capable of just doing more. So all of a sudden our estimating team, instead of getting out, maybe right now I'm making this up off the top of my head because it depends on the size job. But let's say right now they can get 5 jobs out the door over the course of a week. You introduce AI to that, and next thing you know, they're getting 20 jobs out the door in a week because the AI is doing the heavy lifting, and they're just kind of the checks and balances on that. So AI would certainly be a big one for us. I'm sure there's companies that are working on integrating that into equipment. There's already some people. I don't know if this would be considered AI, but there's already some manufacturers that, everything has a computer on it now. Some of the equipment we install have a computer that can, you know, tell you what's wrong with it if something fails. Kind of help diagnose itself. That's certainly an industry trend. Yeah, those are probably the big ones right now. The BIM 3D modeling, that's been around for a while, but that's still certainly top of mind with us as well as others. How do you um, move stuff from the field into a prefab shop? Can you prefab as much as possible through that BIM 3D modeling process and prefab? In a safer environment. And we were talking before the call, instead of guys having to work out in 24-degree weather or 100-degree weather, it's in a controlled environment in a shop, and they're building out these spool pieces. And then when you take it out to the job site, you just make a couple connections. So
Yeah.
certainly where the industry's heading.
Yeah, a bit like big Lego. That's how I
Exactly.
like it.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So with these changes, these digital changes, AI changes, do you see any uncertainties or any concerns in that space?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think, I think a lot of people in the trades think that, hey, AI could never replace what I'm doing. My concern is that, you know, maybe this isn't a 5, 10, 15-year thing, but at some point, maybe it can. They've got robots that are able to lay brick. They've got robots that are able to put shingles down on houses. So it seems like it would only be a matter of time until something like that comes out. Once again, I don't know if that's an immediate concern, but certainly something on the radar. Another concern I mentioned at our company, we aren't backed by billions of dollars, and so trying to make sure that we still stay relevant with that technology without a team that we can dedicate just to figuring out how to implement that. That's certainly a concern. We don't have people that are working on that for 40 plus hours a week. There's a few of us that have, various roles here that are trying to figure out how to implement that. So that's certainly a concern as well. Um, yeah, probably with regards to AI, those would be some of the main concerns.
On the flip side of that, then, what opportunities do you see that excite you the most? I know you've mentioned trying to make things more efficient, but what's the most exciting thing do you see in that space?
Yeah, well, I think once again, specific to AI, I think the efficiency gains is absolutely the piece I'm most excited about. I kind of use the example of estimating. It seems like AI would be a great partner for estimating. It also seems like I mentioned BIM and 3D modeling. It seems like that could be another space where AI could come in and do a lot of the heavy lifting. Once again, instead of getting 5 jobs out in a week, you get 20 or 30 jobs out in a week. So certainly some large efficiency gains there. Um, one other I failed to mention this, but one other kind of concern that I would say we have about not only AI, but even the BIM 3D modeling, kind of all that technology that's coming to our industry, is that in a lot of ways it makes it less of a challenge in the field, which is good and bad, right? On the one hand, it's good because it can speed things up. It can make stuff safer. A lot of good things like that. However, on the flip side, if all of a sudden the folks that you have in the field are basically just putting together a puzzle that says, hey, piece one goes here, piece two goes here, and you just kind of, like you said, like Legos, all of a sudden they aren't familiar with why a system operates the way it does or how the system operates. And so when something goes wrong, it's kind of like, oh man, hit the panic button. What do? We don't know how to correct this because everything's kind of been, I don't know if spoon fed's the right word, but it's just been made simpler. And so that would certainly be a concern. I mentioned some of the HVAC equipment that has some self-diagnosing systems on it. Once again, very neat technology, but all of a sudden you have HVAC techs that are relying on this technology to diagnose equipment as opposed to them being able to go in, hook up gauges and figure out what's wrong. So that would be another concern is that, technology is great, however, can also people can become too reliant on it. Uh, Once again with the AI, office positions can easily rely on AI too much. You have AI generate an email and you don't double check it, you hit the send button, and next thing you know, it says something you didn't want it to say because you got lazy and thought that AI would take care of it. So that would certainly be a concern is becoming too reliant on some of that
Mm.
technology to where people get lazy and lose some of that.
Yeah, I share some of those concerns. That's for sure. Moving on to your business then. Where do you sit in the market? What's your current position? You've mentioned some big players that are billions, and you mentioned your 150 staff. Where are you in that?
Yeah, so in the specific to the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, I would say we are probably the second largest mechanical contractor in the valley. If we step over the mountain, there's a market called Charlottesville. So like University of Virginia would be there. I'm sure people are familiar with that. It's a larger market than what we're in, and you're even getting closer to Richmond, which would be the capital of Virginia. As you go that direction, you get into some much bigger firms. Uh, you know, um, there's at least one other that's affiliated with Comfort Systems USA. Yeah, so they would have that same backing. There's a few others I can think of. One in particular that's last I knew. I don't know if they're still this big, but at one point they were 900 plus employees. They're an ESOP. So there's a couple big contenders in our market. There's also quite a number of folks smaller than us that are continuing to grow. And so we're seeing that more and more, we're competing with these really big guys for some of the bigger work in our area. I think the thing that's been neat for me to see, and once again, we certainly aren't perfect, but we've proven that we can handle some of these bigger projects. We can kind of play in the sandbox with some of these really big guys, which is something that makes me very proud of to see that we've got folks that are very capable that can step up and handle these size projects. I guess that would kind of be specific to construction. On the service side, um, you know, there's certainly service departments, once again, as you move towards Charlottesville, Richmond, bigger than us. I think you'd be hard pressed to find one that's more capable than us. Um, I don't know all the service departments out there, so some could very well argue that they are more capable than us. I know some have more manpower than us, but as far as technical ability, I haven't seen anything that our service department can't tackle. Our kind of our 10-year vision is to be the preferred mechanical contractor in our market. And I think we're working that way nicely.
So leading on to that then, so what does the company do extraordinarily well? What would you say? You've mentioned that you're very capable in the service side, but what would you say you do really, really well?
Yeah, I think the thing that I've always seen us try to do a really good job of. Once again, I'm not going to sit here and say we're perfect at it. We really strive to make sure that the customer is happy with the product that we give them. And I would say I've even seen times where we've gone above and beyond what we should have to try to make, you say an issue arises, we've gone above and beyond to try to make something right, and we've done something maybe we didn't have to. we're as a mechanical contractor, we're oftentimes kind of stuck in the middle of maybe a couple players, whether it's the general contractor, the equipment manufacturer, the controls contractor. So it's not just that, we provide this product and we install it, and there's numerous factors that having that be a success, that project being successful depends on. And so there's been a number of times when we've installed a piece of equipment, there's been issues from the manufacturer, and we would have been well within our right to say, sorry, folks, we installed the piece of equipment like we were supposed to. There's no issues here. This is on you all. This is between you and the manufacturer. Best of luck. Certainly, plenty of times we could have done that, and you know, we make it a point not to do that. You know, we want to make it right. We want to make sure that we make that customer happy and deliver them a product that they're really happy with. Once again, I'm not gonna say we're perfect with it, but I think we really strive for that. I think the other thing that sets us apart, I truly believe, is our culture. I mentioned that we're competing with folks that are significantly bigger than us, and one of the things that we hear oftentimes when we chat with people from those companies is, well, I'm just a number over there. I'm just a number. And as we've grown, we've been intentional about not becoming that. Even though we're 150 people, we work very hard to make sure that no one here feels like they're just a number. One of the things that we do to try to combat that is every new hire has lunch with the ownership team here. It doesn't matter what your role is. It doesn't matter if you're an apprentice or would be kind of an executive level person. All new hires do lunch with the ownership team here on their first day. Um, that certainly doesn't take care of all of that, but I think that's a small piece that's helped us.
Yeah, a nice touch. What do your customers say about you in a positive light? You mentioned going the extra mile. Does that feed back into feedback from your customers?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that's certainly something we've heard. We've certainly heard from customers. I mentioned our capabilities earlier, that we're capable. Our customers have talked about our response time, how quickly we're able to get to them, help them out. I think they've talked about our maybe not quite in the same way, but one of the benefits of being a family-owned organization that's the size we are is we can be pretty nimble and adapt to customers' needs. And so I think we've heard feedback that they appreciate that. We aren't beholden to corporate rules or anything like that. We can be nimble and work with people. There's been times, I would say we try not to do this frequently, but there's even been times when a customer, good customers maybe come to us and said, "Hey, would you consider financing this project for me?" And as long as it's within reason and kind of meets certain criteria, we've been capable of doing something. I think the ability to be nimble and kind of shift to meet customers' demands and act on stuff quickly, I think is certainly some feedback we've heard as well.
So you mentioned your 10-year goal or plan. What about next 6 to 12 months? So bring it down to a shorter time scale. What's your ambition? Where do you want to take the business?
Yeah. So, certainly growth oriented. We're continuing to focus on growth here. I think next 6 to 12 months, I mentioned the Charlottesville market earlier. So we don't have an office over there right now, but I would say we are doing more and more work over there. I think we'll continue to do more work in the Charlottesville market. Um, uh, More players over there, but there's also a lot of work in that market for us to chase. I think we'll continue to, certainly aggressively try to grow our service department. And, I'm sure as you're chatting with people in the construction industry, if you chat with folks that are service oriented or construction oriented, there's uh, certainly pros and cons to both. But, I think we've found that service might not have quite as many challenges as what we face in construction. That's not to say that we aren't going to continue to grow construction. We certainly are doing that, but just maybe get a little more aggressive with our service department and where that's heading. Um, yeah. And any other specific questions for the next six to 12 months that would be helpful?
Um, Only around sort of operational challenges in trying to achieve those objectives. What's standing in the way, I guess, of you achieving those goals of scaling that service side?
Yeah, well, certainly one piece is manpower. You know, trying to find skilled manpower is difficult, very difficult. A stance that we took several years ago was that, once again, this isn't always the case, but oftentimes we would rather bring someone on board that's a really great cultural fit for us and teach them the trade, as opposed to going out and finding someone that's got 25 years of experience. They know how to do everything under the sun, but they don't fit our culture, and people don't enjoy working with them. Every once in a while we find that guy that's got the 25 years experience and is a cultural fit. They're kind of the unicorn out there. Uh, but so that certainly means that, growth is going to be a little bit slower doing it that way, right? By hiring cultural fits and then training them, because there's um, you know, you don't just plug that person in and say, "Hey, go run this job for me." You're bringing them on as an apprentice and spending, I would say, most times 2 to 4 years, kind of getting them to the point where they can operate independently. Whether it's on the service side as a technician, starting to take care of some small stuff for us, some of the simpler service calls and preventive maintenances that we do, or on the construction side is what we would call a junior mechanic. Maybe they're running a small project, or maybe they have an aspect of a larger project that they're responsible for. It's definitely, I would say workforce is the biggest bottleneck to that growth, of finding the people to do the work.
Yeah, it's quite a challenge. There's two aspects to that, really. So how do you retain them? And it kind of swings back around to that whole, Lego building approach, doesn't it? If we can't find the people to actually do the skilled labor, then you turn your hand. You might have no choice but to build in that blocked approach and train people into how to do that. I suppose. I don't think there's a silver bullet to this, and there's no answer to it, by the way. But so how do you keep your staff? Because that's quite an investment, isn't it? If you're bringing them in from a cultural point of view and training them how to do the job,
Yeah.
there's a big risk in them leaving after 2 years with a lot of skill set that you've taught them.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the thing that I would say has brought us the most success with retention, and we've got pretty good retention here, I would say is making sure that we have the right supervisors in place. There's a saying, and I'm gonna butcher it, but something along the lines of, people don't leave a job, they leave their supervisor. Something to that tune, where it's oftentimes people are leaving a job because they don't like their supervisor, or they got some issues there. And I think, once again, the last few years we've been really intentional about who we've put in supervisory roles. I think that's helped our retention a lot. Um, so I would say that's probably the single biggest piece for us, is having good supervisors that fit the culture really well, know where we want to go, and you know, work with their team to keep folks on board. Obviously, we got to pay well. You'd probably be hard pressed to find someone in the construction industry that keeps people without paying well. So that's certainly an aspect. The other piece that I think we have going for us, which I mentioned earlier, is the culture that we have here. Not feeling like you're just a number. Any one of the 150 employees can come talk to me, call me at any point in time. We have quarterly company-wide meetings, and so almost everyone sees me at least quarterly. Some more frequent than that, but being in front of people, having conversations with them, you know, knowing what their family's doing. I think that's important to help retain people.
Nice. What would you say has been the biggest struggle then since you move into the presidency?
I'd probably once again, if you're talking company wide, I'd probably go back once again to just the workforce piece. Just finding people to do the work. Um, like I mentioned earlier, we can find apprentices. When we open up a role for an apprentice here, we get countless applicants. And that's great, as long as we're finding ones that fit the culture here that are a good fit. But that's not a quick fix. Like I said, that's at least a 2 to 4 year game plan. So that's definitely been the biggest struggle, I would say, company wide. It's just finding the workforce to do the work.
So you mentioned your goals in scaling the service side of the business. From a personal perspective, what would it mean to you to achieve those objectives, Matt, in scaling that side?
Yeah, for me, I think uh, one of the things that's been neat. I mentioned EOS earlier. It's a newer platform for us. I mentioned the rocks, the goals that we have. We kind of set the 10-year target, and then you set a 3 year and then a 1 year. And one of the things that's been really neat for me to watch is us hit those targets consistently. We set a goal out there, and then we kind of back into, okay, what's it going to take to get there? And we've consistently been able to do that. And so that's, for me personally, just brings a lot of I'm very proud of the team here that they're able to accomplish that. I think for me, it tells me that we've got a fantastic team here that's able to, you know, meet these objectives. They're knocking it out of the park. And so, yeah, I would just say for me personally, just real sense of pride in the team that we have. Yeah.
Good, nice. Matt, we're coming to the end of the podcast. It's been fantastic talking to you. You spoke so openly and candidly about the opportunities and challenges that you're seeing in industry. So thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to us. Much appreciated, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all. Like I said, thanks for having me, and hope there was some benefit to this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely has been.